Conviction is brought to you by Three Ring Circus Productions. For links to our valued sponsors and all the show notes from this podcast, please visit our website threeringcircus.com.au. At the end of our last episode, Detective Bob Squeaker Irwin had just walked into the home of Les Kalache, an infamous underworld drug lord and a key target of Craig and the team at Project Gaimea. Gaimea had been set up as a completely dark and off-the-grid task force because of the strong suspicion of police corruption. And when that corruption walks right in the front door, well, all hell breaks loose.
So it was a funny time. Here we are, having all these druggies come in and talking to Kalache about what they're going to do and how much they want, and then all of a sudden here's what we're there for. We're there for organised crime and corruption, and knocking at the door right here is Detective Sergeant Bob Irwin, a detective who's been put in place in a task force BACS, which was implemented after the Woods Royal Commission to actually look at the problem with King's Cross identities. And here he is in Kalache's premises. We knew that Kalache wasn't an informant, otherwise Irwin would have had him registered. A registered informant has to be on the books, and we would have known that, so he's not a registered informant. Anyway, the conversation comes in with Kalache, and it's very, very friendly, and to the point where it was over-friendly. And next thing we hear this discussion, and Irwin says, "Got me rates, that's all. Got me rates next month on the..." And Kalache butts in. "So what? What'll do that?" Irwin said, "That's 200. "That's it?" says Kalache. So here's money in this first conversation, the first time that actually Irwin's come into the apartment. Mind you, a heroin dealer and a known drug dealer who is actually a target of Task Force BACS. You've got a detective sergeant who's meant to be investigating him coming in getting money. So the alarm bells were ringing straight away. It was funny, later on, a bit of research down the track, we find that Kalache was an ex-neighbour of Bobby Irwin, and that's how they had the friendship. And it was known through Task Force BACS that Irwin did know Kalache on this nature, yet here he is listed as a target for them as an investigating team. So it was unusual. Again, I keep going back to, Kalache, I thought wasn't a bad bloke. Apart from him dealing drugs, he was a very, very thoughtful and giving person. And we later found out that Bobby Irwin lost his wife to cancer, and Kalache was there to help, and he helped financially with the family. Irwin, coppers, you're not on great wages, but here was Kalache helping out, and whether the money was good or bad, I don't know. But here he was helping out Detective Sergeant Bob Irwin and his family get back on their feet after they lost the mother and wife of the family. So it's a funny situation, and whether Irwin thought that he owed him something or not, I don't know. That's not for me to say, but you can sometimes see the way that police do get involved with these people. And even though they're meant to be on the other side, you can become friends with them, but you just got to draw that line. And I suppose receiving money from him was the wrong thing to do. And it later comes out that maybe he was going to call for favours. So it was a very interesting time with this Irwin coming in, and of course for us it started to make things realise, okay, perhaps he is green-lighted, and green-lighting means that Irwin is looking after him in the way that some drug dealers do like it, that they can be looked after and can be told certain information from police, or they can be sort out that if other police check them on the computers, the police that are green lighting the crooks can then go to the crooks and say, well, such and such is looking at you, we've rung them and said that we're investigating you, and back off, and then they know they're right. And remember at this time too that the people who did have digital phones knew that, or believed that they couldn't be listened to.
As we learnt in an earlier episode, The team at Project Gaimea had been supplied with the very latest in digital phone and intercept technology. It was common knowledge in criminal circles that the police did not yet have access to this technology, but nothing about Project Gaimea was common knowledge.
Things just went on though when we went back to work, and Kalache did his normal things. And one thing at this time, Kalache was running out of drugs. And, he's got people knocking on his door wanting stuff, and he didn't have any supplies at the time. And he thought, okay, well, let's try and produce our own drugs. He was talking to Keith and Dave Parker, and he decided to send someone down to Melbourne. He was trying to buy some pseudoephedrine, which is the main precursor for amphetamines. And he mentioned that he was willing to pay up to $250,000, I think it was at the time, to get a whole heap sent back or brought back by the person that he'd sent down. And the person went down, and a couple of days later came back and said that he had no luck. He couldn't find it. It was very short there. So Dave and Keith and Kalache came up with the idea of doing their own drugs, and what they wanted to do was get a heap of pseudoephedrine out of Sudafed tablets, which are sold by the chemist. Only a small amount of pseudoephedrine is in the Sudafed, but that's obviously open to anyone in the public that can buy it. But obviously they had to get huge quantities, and that was going to be a major job for them to do.
The year is 1997, and extracting pseudoephedrine from common cold tablets in order to manufacture illicit drugs was becoming an increasing problem. By April of 2006, the Australian government made it illegal for a pharmacist to supply it without a doctor's prescription.
The other thing that was mentioned during this conversation was that Kalache had a fair bit of cash, and it was obviously for buying the pseudoephedrine when he sent the guy down to Melbourne, and we sort of wanted to verify that they still had it. And we applied for a covert search warrant, slightly different to a normal search warrant. When we do a normal search warrant, we have to provide the occupier with the search warrant as we go in, or if they're not there, we have to leave it there for them. With a covert search warrant, we can actually enter the property and serve it at a later date, which is usually when the arrest takes place, and you put it in the brief. So we were able to go into the premises without them knowing. Again, it's a hard thing. Luckily for us, Kalache had a routine where he was away in the mornings, and we snuck into the premises and went into his bedroom and did a search through there, and sure enough we found wads and wads of cash shoved in his jacket pocket. I think from memory, there's about $180,000 in cash. We video it, photograph it, put it back and disappear without any knowledge of anyone seeing us or us being in there. And again, it's just continuity of evidence as we go through with these briefs that we try and show that what they're saying, we know what's going on. And again, we prove then the fact that he had this massive amount of cash that the average person wouldn't keep in their jacket in the bedroom. And it went towards, obviously, the conspiracy or to the manufacture of drugs in the future. With the pseudoephedrine that they were producing, it had to come from thousands and thousands and thousands of Sudafed tablets. And what Kalache did, he got probably about 20 of the main suppliers, and they were asked to go out and buy 10 to 15 packs every day from any pharmacists around the area, and then come back in the afternoon and I'll give it to him. Parker, his wife, Bonnie, Kalache, they'd just sit at the lounge room there and they'd be popping these tablets into a bucket day after day after day. And it wasn't until, Parker was whinging about how long this is going to take, and he made the approach then to a pharmacist up in the Central Coast where he lived at the chemist. And I don't know what he said or how he did it, but instead of buying, a couple of 15 packets, he was buying boxes of the Sudafed tablets, which is totally illegal. You can't go in and just buy boxes of tablets. It's obviously going to offer this guy cash, and I don't know how they did it, but the pharmacist up there was willing to supply him these boxes, and all of a sudden they had a multi amount of Sudafed tablets. And the only problem was it would take them so long to pop these tablets into the bucket, but that's what they did. Again, for us, it was a matter of during the week just listening and watching what they were doing, and watching Parker bring boxes into the unit, or he was starting to do it at his own place with his wife. And of course, we had to try and prove the fact that this is what they were doing. You can hear it on a listening device, but the only way we could do it was come bin night. Check their bins because the rubbish has got to go somewhere. So on bin night, we would have to go and collect Kalache's rubbish and Parker's rubbish, collect all the Sudafed tablets, the empty ones, get them out, take them back to our office where we had it and put them in the downstairs car park because there was literally thousands of them, and video it, and again, continuity of evidence. So here we are, some nights, might have been a Sunday night up at Carryong, you got to leave home at midnight and get up there at 1:30 in the morning, go and grab their bins in a ute, which I had, empty their rubbish into bags and put their bin back with the rubbish that you don't want, and then take all the evidence back to the commission and video it. And it was the same with Kalache's bin. Not the greatest job that you had to do, but again, it was just something to show continuing of the evidence that we had.
Like millions of people all over the world, Les Kalache probably felt that small inward sense of satisfaction when he didn't miss bin night. No waking up at 5 a.m. to the sound of the garbage truck rumbling down the street, and the realisation his overflowing garbage bin was still in the garage. Little did he realise that such a simple act of efficiency would later turn up in a brief of evidence in court.
Again, because they were short of drugs, Keith Bonney was given a direction by Kalache to go and get a certain amount of drugs from someone. We didn't know who it was. We don't catch all the conversation because they do have conversations at coffee shops in the morning and we don't get to hear that. But Keith Bonney, we found out, was when he came back to the unit, said, yeah, Les, I've got the gear. I've stored it in the stove at my place. I'll keep it there for a couple of days until you want it. So we had no idea what the gear was, assuming it was drugs he'd picked up and he'd stored at his place in the oven. So we decided to, again, get a covert search warrant for Keith's place. We'd never been in there before. I remember Keith's history is one of the toughest ones around. We knew Keith had a young son who went to school and his wife went to work during the day. And the only thing we could think of was while he was up at Kalache's one particular day, we knew we had the listening device there. It was only about 5 minutes up the road, but we thought that was our only chance to get into his place and sample some of this product. We didn't know what it was again. So, yeah, we went out and got the covert search warrant. And we decided to do it on this particular day where they were up there popping pills. We thought he'd be sitting there for hours. So myself and another fellow were assigned to go into the premises. So we managed to get in unseen. We had what we do, set up a surveillance team on the outside of Bonnie's place. It was only a limited surveillance team just to make sure that no one was coming in and out. And if they did, they'd let us know. Myself and my mate, I was in a pair of boardies with thongs and a singlet and a backpack. And my mate, who was a bit of a surfy looking guy, was the same. We went in and, as I said, there was a small team just out the front, and we had another team up on Kalache's place just watching, to make sure Bonnie didn't leave. Get into the premises, and myself and the other fellow, I can remember particularly this day it was raining, so I took my thongs off before I went up the stairs so there was no footprints leading up. I had dry feet at the time. Went into his unit, had carpet, so again I didn't want to leave muddy or wet marks over the carpet. Got in, went straight into the kitchen, opened up the oven, and sure enough, there it was. It was a big bag of white powder. We took in a set of scales and a small test kit, weighed it, and took a sample, and was starting to pack the gear up when all of a sudden, the outside surveillance team said, get out, he's here, he's in the driveway. And both my partner and I looked at each other and just shit ourselves. I thought, what the hell has gone on here? Here we are in Keith Bonney's place, taking samples of drugs, and here he is driving his driveway. We were meant to get a good 5-minute, 10-minute heads up that he'd left Kalache's place. So what's going on there? And you can imagine what it's like. Your heart's thumping. We can't really go down the way we went. And from memory, I can't remember whether we went over the balcony or through a side entrance, but the neighbour saw us. And Thought obviously it was unusual. Anyway, Bonnie's coming in, the neighbour yells out, Keith, some blokes have broken into your place. And we're off. My mate and I are down the street with our backpacks and we've taken off. And I said to my mate, just split. Anyway, Bonnie's jumped in his car and starts chasing us. I've got this, I always had a little 5-shot revolver. That was my undercover sort of plain clothes gun. It was only a tiny thing. I had the choice at one stage whether to keep a 6-shot, which is a bigger gun, or a small 5-shot. And the small 5-shot I used to have in a pouch, which was down in my undies. And trying to run with this thing, I'll tell you what, it was hard. Anyway, I've taken off, and my mate's gone the different direction, and we've got a radio, so I had a radio with an earpiece in, and the surveillance crew said, just hide, he's in his car, he's looking for you. So I've gone straight down, probably 150 metres away, reasonably fit, so I took off at a great amount of knots, and I've gone down into a underground car park of a unit block, and I saw a big Kalache bin, the big square ones on wheels in the corner, so I've lifted the lid and just jumped straight in that. I thought, there's no way he's going to get out of his car and check out a bin. Anyway, I managed to stay in there for a while. I had my radio going, and my mate's disappeared as well. He's down the beach, and Bonnie wouldn't spot him. He could take his shirt off and just take his cap off and just look like he's gone surfing, so he wouldn't have a clue. Anyway, Bonnie's still looking for us about 15 minutes later. I told the outer perimeter team that we're all right, and we just had to wait for him to settle down. He's gone straight back to Les's. So he's come in and checked his house, made sure everything was there, and found that the drugs were how he left them. Made sure that nothing was taken. I think from memory, the balcony door was slightly ajar, so he just thought that we'd got him through that way. He was telling Les that he'd been broken into by a bunch of druggy surfies, but nothing was missing. How lucky they were. So we managed to get away with that, but it was one of those circumstances that you try to plan for, but some things don't work out. And what had happened was the guy who was doing surveillance up at Kalache's place had actually gone to sleep. And remember, we're working long hours. We're in and out of our places and checking bins at night. And you're not doing your normal, regular 9-to-5 job. You're working big overtime shifts, long days, and sometimes, it just does catch up. And I was pretty cranky at the time that we'd been caught out like that, but I totally understood what had happened with the other guy, and it's not a hard thing to do.
Craig understood how long hours of work and concentration can lead to fatigue, and in this case a very unfortunate nap while on duty. At this time he is burning both ends of the candle, working long hours, training for his upcoming marathon, and taking night shifts with his daughter Jessica as she battled her cancer.
I sort of knew too, that the times with Jessica were hard because you'd be doing all these hours now and you'd have to go back and do your family life as well. And at this time, Jessica was, just finishing her 6 weeks of radiation, which she had a chemo on top of that. And she had done it tough. The radiation isn't an easy thing where they're radiating, and the 6 weeks on the arm, it was a tough time for her as well. She had settled in back to school. She actually loved going back to school, which was a really good thing, and the teachers and the pupils there treated her with such dignity. It was such a great thing. And I couldn't be any prouder of how she managed to do it. We decided to do a few little trips, Lise and myself, with the kids, and go up to the little holiday house. But at this time, remember, I'm training for this marathon, and I thought I could actually paddle up there. It's a decent paddle. It's probably 25 k's. Got to go through open water between Palm Beach and the Central Coast, and then up through the Brisbane waters, which comes into a really narrow place, and the tides there are really treacherous, and it was great training. If I picked a outgoing tide, I had to paddle against it. So I always thought that if I picked the hardest points during the marathon when it got hard, I'd be prepared for it. And that's how I used to train. No matter how heavy the wind was or the swell was, I tried to get out in those rough conditions and the worst conditions.
Craig was methodical. His police work demanded it, and he took the same attitude in all areas of his life. The preparation for this open water marathon surf ski paddle was no different. He took every opportunity to prepare for this arduous feat. After all, it was going to be the equivalent of paddling from San Francisco to San Diego. almost the entire Californian coastline.
This particular day, I said to Lisa, I'm going to paddle up, and she was happy with that. She got in the family car and said, I'll just drive, which took her about an hour and 15. And I'd said if I left about an hour earlier than what she left, I'd get there about the same time. And it was great. It was a perfect training for me. And she was happy just to get in the car with the kids and turn the radio on, and that's what we did. Went up there and had a great paddle up. And we spent about 3 days together there. It was fantastic, the usual thing where we used to go to the beach or go out shopping and go to the movies and have a night out dinner. Jessica had completely lost her hair at this stage, but didn't worry. She was still healthy enough to be able to do things. She wasn't suffering any major side effects. It was only when she was in hospital that she'd be vomiting after the chemo, but on her days off she was great, and it was great to see her as just a normal little kid. Came time to come home, and I said to Lisa, without even looking at the weather actually, I said I'll do the normal, I'll just paddle back. I started paddling back and it started to get a bit stormy, and I thought it's just a bit of a slight weather, rain, etc. But as I got towards the heads and between the Central Coast and Palm Beach, there's probably about a 5 kilometre open ocean paddle. This storm came through and the wind got stronger and stronger and stronger. It was more or less cyclonic. It actually, when Lisa was driving back, she couldn't come back through parts of Sydney because the trees had come down and she was stuck. I was halfway between, and the winds got that strong I couldn't paddle, and it was virtually lifting the ski up. It knocked me off. I grabbed the ski, I grabbed my paddle, and I just had to bear hug it, and it blew me back to shore. It wasn't until I got back into the still water out of the swell that I got back onto the ski and paddled it into a little holiday house on the point that no one lived in, and I threw my ski under there, and I went out to their wharf and I saw a boat coming through, and I waved them down, and they were heading back into Pittwater over to Palm Beach. So I hitched a ride with them back to Palm Beach and left my ski over there, and I then got back to Palm Beach. I thought Lisa's going to be petrified and worried. I've got no phone, I've got no radio, no nothing. She would be shitting herself that something's happened to me. So I got dropped off at Palm Beach and then had to run 6 kilometres in bare feet through rubble and everything else back home, and thinking that she'd be there, but she wasn't even home herself. She'd been caught up.
Dealing with this freak storm would prove to be an invaluable experience during the actual event. Craig knew the basic truth of the old saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. However, even the best preparation can't predict every eventuality. This was a holiday Craig Gouzet style. A relaxing 3 days with the family, sandwiched between 25 kilometres of open water paddles.
I'd done another paddle similar to that. It was in a good condition though, and it was a long paddle. It was 20-something k's, and I'd been out to sea for a while by myself, and I paddled back into the headlands. And I remember it was really, really hot, and I thought I'll just jump off the ski, and I could see it was about 15 foot of water, so maybe 3 or 4 metres. I thought I'll dive down to the bottom and then push off the sand and come back up to the ski. And as I've done it, I've dove down. It was fantastic. It just cooled me down straight away. I could see the bottom coming close, so I've turned around and pushed off, and all of a sudden I got this massive pain through my foot. And I had no idea what I'd done. And I've swum up to the top and jumped back on the ski, and I had this intense throbbing pain. Anyway, I managed to sort of get my foot up and have a look. It's hard enough on the ski because it's so hard to balance on the skis, but here was all these black spikes coming out of my foot. And what I'd done is I'd tread straight onto a sea urchin and pushed off the sea urchin, which is just full of spikes, and they'd shattered into my foot. And of course you've got to steer with the rudder on your ski. It was so hard. I think it was my left foot. So every time that I needed to put the left foot down to steer to get home, it was just pain. I eventually got home, and it was a Sunday afternoon where I used to do my long paddles, and hobbled upstairs, and Jed was there, luckily. Jed got a razor blade out and cut little bits every time there was a spike. I think we counted 48 spikes in my foot, and if you leave them in there, they get infected. But we seemed to get them all out, and that was just another little tale of the training.
The next day he returned to work to find that Kalache's little business venture was progressing to a critical point.
So all good things come to an end, and my 3 or 4 days off with the family, which was brilliant, came to an end, and it was time to go back to work. I found out that they had popped a fair amount of Sudafed tablets and had a massive bucket of powder, which they were ready to go. And they'd been talking about this cook, but we had no idea of where the cook was or who was doing it. Kalache mentioned that he'd enlisted someone that he'd met. We're assuming he may have met them through prison or through some sort of other illegal form of manufacturing or something, but we had no idea. All we knew was the next day the cook was going to arrive.
In the next episode, the team continue their surveillance of Kalache and his attempt to become a drug manufacturer. Jessica continues her brave battle against cancer, and preparations for the open water marathon paddle ramp up. Meanwhile, Craig and his partner are saved by a kangaroo.